We're gonna move on to our next speaker, Natalia Pronina, who is the Vice President of Investor Relations at CIS and Eastern Europe at EB5 Capital. Natalia.
Еще раз представлюсь, меня зовут Наталья Пронина, я вице-президент по работе с инвесторами в региональном центре EB5 Capital. Мы находимся в Вашингтоне, DC. У нас сейчас раннее утро, и уже более 16 лет наша компания работает как один из крупнейших операторов лицензий региональных центров. То есть мы занимаемся отбором и структурированием проектов под государственную программу EB5, о которой, собственно, мы сегодня и будем говорить. Значит, сразу хочу предупредить вопрос, который сейчас задают практически все те, кто рассматривают для себя опцию получения грин-карты за инвестиции. Что происходит с так называемой золотой картой, да, которая была анонсирована неоднократно. Очень много по этому поводу было написано статей, высказано мнений. Я уже не говорю про слухи и предположения. Значит, ситуация такова, что на данный момент нет такой программы, нет такого способа получить какой-то статус там золотой или как его еще называют, да, грин-карту Трампа, как только уже не называли. Значит, такой программы.
The program EB5 is non-existent. There is no legislation that would make the application of this program legally applicable, and we don't know whether, and our legislators are actually questioning its future. I'd like to say more about this green card, but it's non-existent anymore. So we're gonna talk about EB5 program, which has been existing for over 35 years. And this program accommodates people that are ready to invest, and the families of these people can also, we're talking about entrepreneurs and investors whose families can also, holders of passports from many countries can use, the United States is open for applicants from all countries. The requirements for the applicants are quite simple. We're talking about $800,000 USD worth of investment, and this amount will not change by the end of 2027, because under the legislation here, the minimum amount is set by the government, and it is recalculated. It is updated every 5 years. So in late 2027, the amount of the investment might stay intact or change. Nevertheless, by late 2027, we continue using the minimum investment amounting to 800,000 USD. What are the benefits of the green card, and why do we need the EB5 program altogether? Since oftentimes people say that green card is needed for those people that would like to reside in the US, and that is true. But when talking about EB5, I'd like to say that EB5 is interesting for those people that don't want to reside in the US for a number of reasons. It might have to do with issues of taxation or some other reasons, and EB5 is actually helping people out when the investor that can get the green card does not need to get the green card, but his or her children need to get the green card. A majority, which is about 80 to 85%, when we have talking about our experience, over 200 families that underwent this process for some family reasons. We're talking about families whose children studied in the US and did not want to go back after their graduation. Or we can talk about parents that have to prepare the future employment conditions for their children after their graduation in the US, or there are some other reasons for the use of EB5. We might also talk about families with several children, and one lump sum investment can provide EB5 for all the family members. The program is joined by all the children under the age of 21, and they all get the green card. So I would like to emphasize the fact that EB5 allows to get the green card in some other ways, but the entrepreneur or an outstanding investor or an outstanding scientist, engineer can use other options, but these options are not applicable, and because the applicant himself or herself do not want to possess the green card, and they're only mindful about their children. So they provide their older child, for example, with the green card. The green card is providing people with all the rights that are equivalent to those of a citizen, um, except for the right of voting. And the green card is covering all the rights and fulfills all the needs of people that would like to reside in the US. Oftentimes, people ask a question whether as to whether the project, the investment project, is associated with specific. Well, in the US, it's absolutely not important for you to know where the investment project is implemented, and you should not be attached to that area or to that city. Once you get the green card, you can immediately apply for the passport. I'd like to say that in the US is using identical requirements for the citizenship 5 years after the acquisition of the green card. One can apply for the citizenship or the passport. This is contingent on the requirement to stay for 192 days a year in the country. If you don't have this opportunity, you should you should notify about it beforehand in advance. This is why EB5 is selected by people that would like to pre-plan their fulfillment of residential requirements. This slide is quite complex. I think we will focus on the term of approving EB5 application, which is lasting from 7 to 18 months. That is the waiting time. We always tell investors to think about a rather more conservative scenario, which is 1.5 years at least, and after the approval of your application, you get your green card. This is an important point because the legislation envisages an option when the investor is in the US while waiting for the approval, and that is one of the benefits of the program, especially after the year 2022 when the new law was introduced. And the law says that if the investor is in the US or they applied and then they enter the US wanting to wait for the completion of this immigration procedure in the US, then the legislation allows for the investors stay in the US. They can study or work if they want to. So EB5 became much more predictable based upon these opportunities, whereas previously many countries did not know how to plan their moving without knowing when their applications would have been approved. In case of families that have children that can potentially become university or school pupils or university students, they would have a much more difficult time planning their future. But in this particular case, EB5 allows them to to come to the United States, and they can come in or go out if they need to, while waiting for the approval. So this waiting time, while being uncertain, it's quite certain nowadays. You already have the right to be employed or to launch a business or to study. The initial green card is issued for a period of 2 years. So the decision that you can become the resident of the country is made by the migration service based upon the fact that the investor has invested investment funds into the project, and the investor has to showcase the fact that these investment was made in a legal way. You can talk all of the aspects and minute details over with your migration lawyer, who will tell you about the documents you have to collect to avoid additional questions being asked to you. So historically, the EB5 approval statistics is quite high. Do not glance through the official the official statistics by the migration office, because back in 2019 the quality of applications was quite poor, and unfortunately some immigration lawyers would just file whatever they would get their hands on. In a normal situation, your immigration lawyer will tell you upfront what kind of chances you have to be approved, and what kind of documents you have to collect, so you're not asked additional questions. Over the 17 years of our company's operations, we have had over 2,000 family cases, and we had 2 to 3% refusal. We might admit 4% at the most. So the EB5 approval rate is quite high altogether. So and the stage when you are collecting when you're collecting your documentation and you compile your documents, you collect them, and that will determine the outcome. Because once you get the first green card, you live with it for 2 years, then you get your lifelong green card, and you get the lifelong residence status, and that outcome is based upon whether your project has established or created the number of jobs necessary to contribute to the economy. Every application should establish at least 10 jobs, and we're going to talk about it more in a minute's time. When it comes to the investment return, EB5, many people heard that EB5 should be a risky investment. What is meant by that? The risk criteria is about some sort of insane investment which can fail eventually. No, any investor, just like any entrepreneur with their business, runs certain risk, because there's no way for them to know what will happen tomorrow, figuratively speaking. They cannot predict whether they will have 100,000 USD worth of revenue, 105,000 worth of USD worth of revenue. So EB5 is usually, the developer is usually assuming all the economic risks, and because there is no guaranteed return on a certain date, this investment is considered to be economically risky, because there's no guaranteed return. In the US, guarantee is considered to be something very clear, such as 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, something very certain like that. In this particular case, we cannot guarantee that, because because I can get sick, I can get in touch with other entrepreneurs and business people later, or something can happen to me. So EB5 does not support buy an apartment and get the green card type of technique, so to say, in the country. For that reason, you can never purchase real estate for personal use, because that real estate will have nothing to do with creating jobs. If you see this kind of announcements, which can be rarely rarely found nowadays. You should know that this kind of investment is not suitable for EB5. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our company. We've been working with EB5 program for 17 to 18 years. Our license is covering the entire territory of the US, so we can support projects in any place throughout the US, and we have supported 45 projects. Angelique Brunner is the founder of the company. She held many positions back in those years when EB5 was being considered. We back then in those days we were invited to visit the Congress. We were one of 5 regional centers which participated, which underwent the litigation, and right now we act as an intermediary between the legislature and the program itself, because sometimes it's quite difficult to understand what the Congress has decided or the concept the Congress is coming up with regarding the program should be interpreted. If you're interested to get more information about Angelique, I can provide you with more information. Back in 2019, in those days when the reforms program was actively discussed, ever since 2019, we've been actively participating in the activities in our sector. We have a lot of employees because we are fulfilling a lot of functions, because the EB5 process is quite complicated, and the process is starting after a person decides to become an investor under our project, and all the way to the acquisition of the green card by them. As I said early on, we work with all languages. We have our members of the department that is covering investors speak all the languages that are used by investors to communicate, to make sure that investors understand how EB5 is working and what their decision should be based upon. Right now, we will talk about specific projects by way of an example, because EB5 is working like a bank. It's funding the borrowers that comply with the program requirements, because oftentimes here is one more delusion. People think sometimes that investors are handing their money over to the regional center and the money is then disappearing somehow, somewhere. The investment itself is always has a target nature, and the supervision, the control over the funds that are invested in a targeted way is conducted by the project administrator, project manager. So the operation of the regional center is regulated quite stringently, and after 2022 the regulations became so stringent that many companies have left the sector altogether, because they were quite successful, but they were not professional regional centers, and for that reason many players have left the sector, because the compliance became too complex for them, as they had to hire too many people, and that would contradict the goals and objectives of such companies. We're not into developing or building. We are funding projects, just like banks do. We select projects, then we recommend and register projects with the immigration service. We get those projects approved, and then we can also propose such projects to the applicants, and we have a separate special document that is listing all the projects that we have implemented from the year 2008, including their status, whether or not the project is completed or it is in process. And when it comes to servicing the investors or investor services, we're not only talking about the need to manage these assets, we also have to collect data for the immigration service pertaining to the creation of jobs. We provide twice a year, we provide reports, intermediary updates, if investors have an opportunity or the desire to come to visit and see the project before they make the investment or after they have launched the process. We are managing that entire process and we try to make it as convenient as possible for our investors. And as an example, I'd like to talk about the project of reconstruction of an outdated or old hotel in Aspen. This project has already been approved by the immigration service and it is currently undergoing the development stage, and we are looking for investors for this project. Investors that are trying to look for investment projects before they have talked to immigration lawyer are not doing the right thing, because if you're interested in knowing what to do, yes, you have to talk to the regional center. You need to get examples of investment cases. But the most important step in this area is to be consulted by our specialists or experts. And if you don't have such a lawyer, you can tell us about it and we will provide you with an expert lawyer. And once the lawyer tells you that you can move forward using your source of funds, it will be sensible for you to start considering project. For example, the regional center is closing down one project to launch another project. Sometimes we support or implement two projects at the same time. Unlike European Golden Visa project, where you can purchase an entire asset or become an owner of an asset, EB5 is always about participation within a group of investors in the developing project. So you have to consider technical parameters, which is something we're going to do right now. For example, in Aspen, we are going to have 108 investors. Right now, we have about 45 people sign up or register, and I think very soon the project will be closed. The registration will be closed down, but that doesn't mean that you should not consider it. You can join the project still in December of 2025 or by January 2026. Once we get the list of interested investors, we start we start sorting out and processing their data, and we are interacting with their lawyers. The project is a reconstruction of an old days hotel, which will have to be reconstructed to become a luxury boutique hotel on the same level with Four Seasons, and it will have a new management. It will operate under a new brand. So you got 2 more minutes to go. Excuse me. Beautiful. Well, I'd like to once again emphasize the fact that this presentation is for your familiarization. Just let us know if you're interested in some details from this presentation. We can always discuss them with you. Every project has appropriate funding envisages appropriate funding by sponsors. Some of the sponsorship comes from banks that have approved the project and decided to allocate a construction loan. And also EB5 is allocating 42% funding in this particular case. And we have common rights with banks concerning bankruptcy situation. So should the project fail, we will be first to get back our funds. So 42 per 41, as you can see here, the economic risks are clearly seen. The economic risk is borne by developers, of course, as they are investing, they're first to invest and they're last to leave the project. But all the loan funds have to be repaid to the bank. So the investment period is 1 to 3 years, which is very good for any project. You see 0.5% preferred return preferred by the investor. We pay investors 0.5% because the purpose of this investment is about the green card. So if somebody doesn't have any immigration intention, EB5 should not be of interest for you. The EB5 investment is supporting immigration benefits for the future immigration, and so you can also get the preferred return at the end of the immigration process. This makes me wind up on presentation. There is another example concerning another project, but all of these slides are pointing out not only minimum requirements, but they also are discussing investments by each and every investor. You can establish 15, 18, or 20 jobs instead of the required 10 jobs, for example. If you have any questions to ask, please get in touch with me. The webinar organizers will assist you in getting in touch with me. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Natalia. We have got a couple of questions. Perhaps I will ask some of them right now.
What happens
And
if EB5 project underperforms or delays? How is investor risk mitigated?
that's a very good question. We didn't have enough time to talk about guarantees, so we will now make up for that. Fortunately, the immigration process and its outcome does not influence the immigration benefits. The ultimate result, the lifelong green card, is the ultimate result or outcome of this process once all the necessary jobs have been created. So during the project implementation, upon the receipt of each and every report by the investor, you see the number of documented jobs, and that makes you understand the status of the project. Majority of jobs, for the most part, jobs are created at this stage project called the development stage, and in this way we are fulfilling the requirement by providing investors with green cards. If we consider the most pessimistic scenario, for example, of the COVID pandemic, for example, if let's say something bad happens and the asset failed to start operating, in the worst case, the required number of jobs have been created, and that will not negatively impact the immigration process of the investor, because the acquisition of the green card does not depend on the success of the investment project. Of course, all the participants of this deal are interested in the project's success, because investors cannot get their returns if they don't repay their loan. But at the same time, there are some force majeure situations, such as the COVID pandemic, for example, which we're using to point out the fact that immigration requirements do not depend on the real life situations and the financial calculations. Well, the speed of moving will depend on how speedy you want it to happen. If you would like to find yourselves in the US as soon as possible because you need your children to start attending classes in a university or school, you need to have the US visa. If an investor cannot get a tourist visa, for example, or they are refused the tourist visa, the only option for them to take is to wait outside of the US. In this particular case, I would say 1 to 1.5 years time would be most appropriate. The National Visa Center gets you in touch with the consulate where you have to attend the interview, and that period can last from 4 to 6 months, for example, and that's the only way you can delay your entry in the US, because you will have to wait. Many investors are living outside of the US, but they have active visas and they come to the US and stay in the US while waiting for the approval. And in this particular case, the process itself is much more technical. Depending on how busy the immigration service is, and in particular the green card issuing department, you will have to just wait for that certain period of time. Thank you very much for the answers, Natalia. I think we will be able to answer all the questions at the end. Let's switch on to our next speaker. Thank you for your attention.